Hello, welcome to Followers of the Cross podcast. This is your host, Jason Reynolds. Today I'm interviewing Jean Watson. She is a Christian classical violinist and international star. Watson has a new worship album called Wonder. Michael W. Smith played the piano for one of the songs on Wonder. I'll let Watson tell you more. Anyway, thanks for calling today, and Jean, tell me a little bit about your background. Tell me a little bit about your album that's coming out. I believe that is your 8th album.
It is, yes, and it's been a long journey for me. I started out as a classical musician, actually. I started playing violin when I was 7, and so all growing up, I thought I would have a career just playing classical music. That's the only thing I knew. I went to a conservatory and studied classical music and got a degree in violin performance, and so those were my goals and dreams for my life. And but then I had to lay music aside for a time. I got married and had 4 children, so music just completely wasn't part of my life anymore. And then as life went on, things happened that I didn't expect, and instead of ending up pursuing those musical dreams, I ended up in a place of just survival. My marriage ended in divorce, unfortunately, and we had moved around a lot as a family, so I found myself just in a position of having to put food on the table and feed the children, and I didn't have any job skills in those days, and so I was really struggling emotionally and spiritually and financially, and it was at that point in my life, this was about 15 years ago, I cried out to God and asked Him to help me. I just opened my Bible, and I saw Psalm 116:4, which just said, "Oh God, save me." And I said, "Lord, I just need help. I feel like I've screwed up my life." And after that prayer, some things radically shifted in my life. Someone just called me out of the blue and offered me a job playing the violin, which was a miracle. And then someone else accidentally heard me sing. My landlord accidentally heard me sing and gave me my rent money back and said that singing, he thought, was what I was supposed to do with my life. And so that's how the ministry started back in about 2002. I started recording CDs and singing and speaking wherever I would get invited, and started out very small, and then I started traveling around the United States, and by about 2007 my music had been heard in Europe. So I started flying over to England and traveling around with just a violin and a keyboard sometimes and a computer, and just sharing this message that God had heard my voice and turned my life upside down. And it was all Him, I was just understanding God's grace. And so anyway, I just went to England, back and forth to homeless shelters, prisons, playing on street corners and churches and coffee houses. And God just started using the music to do amazing things, to change people's lives in every way, just like He had changed my life. So, I realized this was about ministry. It was not like a big music career to make Jean famous, but He was using my gifts to just bring His word and bring His kingdom. It was fantastic. So I went into Scotland, I got into Ireland, started preaching on a daily radio show in Ireland, which I still do today. And then back home, still making music, still recording, and God was opening up more and more doors, all the way up till this latest album, Wonder, which I just finished with producer Billy Smiley. Michael W. Smith came alongside me and actually accompanied me on one of the tracks, which was wonderful. And John Ellis of 363 sang, and Peter Furler of the Newsboys played drums, and it just so we ended up with this wonderful musical project, which again, it's just a thing that God did that I feel I could never have done on my own.
So tell me, that's fascinating, the phone call that you got, just offering the job. That does sound like a God thing, but tell me a little bit more about that job.
Oh, it's amazing.
What sort of were you playing for, like were you playing for a choir? Were you playing for recording artists?
No, it was for a symphony orchestra, and this was amazing because in the music world there just are not very many jobs. It's hard to find a job as a professional musician. And so here I got a phone call from a man, and he said, "Is your name Gene Watson?" And I said, "Yes, it is." And he said, "Do you play the violin?" I said, "Yes, I do." And he had gone through the phone book calling all the Watsons until he found one that played. And he had been sitting in a restaurant the night before. This was the story he told me. And he was the concertmaster of the Kalamazoo Symphony, a professional orchestra. And he heard someone talking about a violinist that had moved to Kalamazoo, Michigan. And he said, "I want to hear you play." And so upon hearing me, he told me later that my self-esteem was just on the floor, and I had no idea how talented I was, and asked me if I wanted a job. And so I got a job playing violin in the orchestra, which was what I was trained to do way back in the day. And, it was just I knew it was God, because I didn't even try. I just picked up the phone, and there was the call, that invitation to play.
Wow. That is,
yeah.
that is powerful. Amen. So that was back earlier on in your recent music career. Tell me a little bit more about the new album, which I believe comes out on October 14th. And tell me a little bit about how this came about, and is there a theme for this, and what kind
Sure.
And all of that.
Well, as we're speaking here today, I keep coming back to God's grace, which is this idea of God doing something that we can't do for ourselves, which is really the story of my whole life. God just coming in and doing these things that I didn't initiate and wouldn't be able to accomplish. And so this new album, which is called Wonder, was a God idea. We hadn't planned on recording. I had just finished a new album last year, and as you know, music is expensive to produce, and so I wasn't thinking I was going to record again. But while we were in the studio, I was with John Ellis of 363, and we just started messing around and playing worship music just for fun. And it was just one of those moments that we knew something was happening that was just beyond, again, what we could naturally do. It was just this incredibly beautiful sound that was being created. So Billy Smiley just, started recording it. And so we recorded a few songs, and originally it was just going to be a very simple acoustic thing, just for fun. But then, like I said, more musicians got involved. We asked Michael W. Smith, and I was just really surprised that he said yes. And he came in and he played for me for his song "I Can Hear Your Voice," which is a worship song that he and his wife and his daughter had written several years ago. And so by this time, Billy Smiley, I got a phone call from him probably in January, and he said, "This is just phenomenal. I think we really need to finish this project right. God's doing something." So I just collected songs that spoke to my heart and drew me into worship. So only one of the tracks is one that I've written called "Everything Can Change." The others are from different songwriters that I feel just capture a different aspect of God's glory and can speak to the listener and just, hopefully speak to the listener of God's love and draw the listener into God's presence through music. So that's the mood I was in. It was just worship. Some of it's instrumental. I still do a lot of violin. So 3 of the tracks are violin instrumentals that were spontaneously created, or one of them is an Irish fiddle tune that we added world music, drums and electronics to. It's just crazy. And
wow.
even a classical piece. I don't think anybody's ever done this. I did a classical violin piece, and again we added world music, drums, and an Australian drummer, and great electronics, and
wow.
brought it into the 21st century. It's really exciting. It's a world music kind of sound.
When you say world music, I'm
really
sorry. Can you
Sure.
expound on that?
Yeah, world music, what I would classify as world music is something that takes sounds from the culture, the musical cultures from around the world. So you'll hear things that it might sound a little tribal and African sometimes. It might sound Australian. It definitely has Irish penny whistles in it. It's a very exciting, sometimes sort of an exotic sound. It's not going to be like anything that you've heard probably on Christian radio. It's very unique, very unique. And I'm excited that I have the opportunity to be creative like that and really not worry about, if the album is going to chart or if people are going to, how people will respond. I just felt like it was something I should share that's uniquely me.
Yeah, and as from one creative to another, someone who's extremely creative, then me with words, you with music and all of that. And my hat's off to you because music is such a gift. And
yeah.
When you're when someone's so talented in that. But from one creative to another, it has to be gratifying to work on a project where you're able to bring something new to a genre, because it seems like so often in commercial projects that let's build upon the same thing, or certainly
right.
some of the bigger
right.
brands do that, like crank out again, and there's no room for
yep.
experimenting. And it sounds like you've
yes.
had the opportunity then to do some experimenting and to do some new,
yes.
fresh take on. I'm sorry, and I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I do feel like I'm taking a little bit of a risk, but I'm kind of old enough now, and I've been on the journey long enough now that I'm willing to take that risk. I started coming down to Nashville in maybe 2004 to try to learn how music was made on a commercial level, and how to do that in the Christian music world. Mm-hmm. And what I found was exactly what you're talking about was there was a tendency to push everything into a mold that sounded the same or similar. They would find a model of something that worked, and by they, I'm thinking producers and people in radio, Christian radio, find a model of something that people seem to like, and they were buying it, and so let's make everything sound like that. And
mm-hmm.
So my first few albums in Nashville, I don't feel like they're my best work because I was trying to sound like other people, and I was very insecure about myself. I knew I was different. My voice is different. It has kind of an Irish, Celtic-y, Enya sound to it. It's kind of a breathy sound, and I knew I was different. And I had the classical violin, and because I felt different, I felt insecure, like I wasn't good enough. I had to sound like Christian artists that had gone before me, and I certainly didn't. So I must not be good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was meeting Billy Smiley 2 or 3 years ago, veteran producer down here in Nashville, and Billy is the one who, first of all, he saw that I really wasn't being successful at that. And then secondly, gave me the courage to be myself and validating that that what I had, the way God had made me was valid and beautiful. And we should try to bring that out and not worry about what people would think. And so he gave me the courage to step out and do that and, again, take some musical risks. But what I found, and I always, coach other artists, is your best sound is going to be uniquely you, and try not to make yourself sound or look like anyone else, because we all reflect God's glory in a unique way. So hopefully I'm having the freedom to do that and encourage other people to do the same.
Yeah, that is awesome. So, Jean, what have we not discussed yet that you want to make sure that people who read the blog or hear the podcast
mm-hmm.
learn about regarding yourself, your testimony, your music, whatever it is?
I think something that I think people notice about me that might be different is that as I'm traveling around from place to place and I'm performing, I don't do music for entertainment sense. I do love to entertain, and I hope people love the sound of the music, but the Lord has, because he did such a marvelous work in me that enabled me to do this in the first place, my motivation is much more to see hearts moved and changed and to have an encounter with God. And that's why I'm so passionate about continuing prison ministry. Certainly don't sell any CDs there, but the reward is just so astounding to see